recognize the ranking member for 5 or more minutes.
Thank you. Eric, you're really earning your government salary today. I guess I do have a question, but first let me speak to the Cuba issue. And Chairwoman, I respect, she obviously has very strong perspective, very strong convictions, and I know many people in her district agree with her. I guess I want to present a bit of an alternative because she knows we disagree on this. Since the early 1960s, we tried one thing, which was to distance ourselves from Cuba, sanction Cuba, to isolate Cuba, and the result was that the Castros stayed in office for decades and decades and decades, and the people in Cuba were impoverished. The society fell behind other nations of the world, even though it has incredible potential as a nation, and the people have incredible potential. And I think it comes down to whether you believe going forward we should stick to those 1960s policies, or whether we would have more influence on the direction of Cuba. Again, not picking their leaders or picking how they do things, just like we don't need to do for any other nation, but have some influence in the direction they take. I think that the answer is engagement. And I know the designation of terror came in the last week, I think, of the Trump administration, that the Secretary of State made that designation, literally on their way out. And so I hope that you all will undertake that review. I think it is a necessary review. And again, it comes down to me whether we're going to take a different approach than we took for decades and decades that obviously has not worked. Or whether we're going to leave Cuba in the hands of nations like China and Russia. And I think that's why I was supportive of what President Obama was trying to do in his second term, which was to normalize diplomatic relations, to start preparing at that time for the departure of both the Castros and be ready at that time, in that moment, to build a closer relationship with the Cuban people and the Cuban government to try to make the country more democratic and to take a different course. It didn't end up panning out that way, obviously. In fact, when President Trump came in, like I said, in their last week, they designated the country as a state sponsor of terror. And that is where the Biden administration took over, and that's where it finds itself now. But I hope that we will take a different course. But I did have a question I wanted to ask you. I'm concerned about the ongoing efforts to undermine and discredit the convictions of the 8 individuals found guilty of the murder of human rights and environmental defender Berta Cáceres. As you know, the appeals to those convictions are ongoing and are overdue for a judgment. And I'm concerned, as are other members of Congress, that the judges are coming under undue pressure to free the convicted corporate executives that ordered that murder. Is the United States closely tracking the court case, and will you commit to pushing back against false statements regarding the facts of the case?
Thank you very much for that question, Ranking Member Castro. And yes, we are tracking the case and the ongoing concerns for environmental defenders in Honduras, and happy to work closely with you, your office, and our embassy in Honduras to ensure that we follow up and ensure a free and fair trial on this.
And we're now 2 years in the administration of President Castro there, who was elected with the backing of much of civil society. What do you see as the trends for the safety and freedom of civil society in Honduras?
Thank you very much. We certainly work very closely with Honduran civil society on a number of issues. I was in Honduras earlier this year, met with members of civil society. I would say in particular, met with members of Griefina community, LGBT community who feel under threat. So I feel there's much more we can do. The embassy works very closely to ensure that these individuals, these groups have our support. But we do think there's more that can be done, including through the human rights protection mechanism in Honduras. So we'll continue to push hard on that.
And then one more question for now. In February 2023, the United States worked to free 222 Nicaraguan political prisoners who were imprisoned by the Ortega Murillo regime. In fact, we flew those people directly to the United States on a U.S. government-funded flight. And many of those individuals have been rendered stateless by the regime, and they've applied for asylum, so they're not at the risk of deportation. I understand that of the 160 individuals who applied for asylum, only one has had an interview so far. So I wanted to ask you, will you work with your colleagues at DHS to prioritize their asylum applications or provide them advance parole before the end of the year, especially given our role in bringing them to the United States.
Thank you very much. So the State Department and USAID allocated significant resources to enable a safe transportation and immediate to near-term care for the 222 individuals released from prison in Nicaragua. However, we don't have the resources or mandate to provide the long-term care some of the 222 require. But in terms of your specific question, since the arrival of the 222, the State Department has worked closely with USCIS to facilitate the travel of immediate family members of these individuals from Nicaragua to the United States through lawful pathways. This will continue as more members of the 222 become sufficiently established in the United States. So in terms of those who are in process, once members of the 222 submit their asylum applications, the State Department can provide comments on specific asylum applications to USCIS or to the Department of Justice, and happy to work with you to follow up on the specific procedures.
Thank you. I yield back, Chairwoman.
You had another 5 minutes. All right. Now I recognize Representative Self for 5 minutes.